All right, so Trey, I've been trying to just so you know, I don't know if I shared this with you last time I was on, but I'm trying to hype now that we've got this new setup that Gabe's created, that that Ty's running in the background. We got YouTube, we got Discord going on. Yet when we start now, we're also like we need to send our social post right away. I got to get these question boxes all set up and ready. I've been trying to hype Gabe to come up with an intro video. That we play just kind of a short little video while we go live, and we're still doing this stuff behind the scenes. And then Cameron, just a couple days ago, said you should have walk-up songs. So like each coach could develop and have their own walk-up song. Then we'd have like a little video the night that coach or day that coach is doing something. What do you think?
It's an interesting idea. I don't hate it.
So then I want to know, what would your hype song be?
I mean, that's a tough one.
What's the walk-up song for Trey Greenwood?
That's a tough one. That's a tough one. Uh,
What's the first one that comes to mind? Not that that has to be it.
First one that comes to mind is, let's see, Tom Sawyer by Rush.
Oh, that would be a good one.
Yeah.
Good drum intro on that
Oh
one
yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So chat, you can chime in here before we get started and let us know. Do you think Trey, his walk-up video song should be Rush, Tom Sawyer? I think that would be great. That
Yeah.
would Bama Chaser said W on the song choice. Hemelizer Jen says great song, Trey. She's saying I'm going to listen to it on the way to work tomorrow. Ben Hart gives a yep. Paxi, absolutely. So awesome. I see What's the Big Dilly is in YouTube and our YouTube chat. So hello to you as well. Radar Sharks in the house. Living Z. So tonight we get blessed with the presence of the co-godfather of Storm Chaser coaching, Coach Trey Greenwood, Storm Chaser meteorologist extraordinaire. So I know tonight we're going to hear a little bit about a case study on a dryline target. And so this is going to be exciting. So this is like real world stuff, gives you a chance to really see what happened that day. Maybe what you saw, what you might have thought, but Trey's going to walk through that with us. So that's going to be great. But few housekeeping items before we get started. Again, welcome to everybody on YouTube and watching live on Discord. If what we're going to do is, so everybody gets a chance to tune in. It's free to everybody to tune in, listen to Trey's presentation, and then we'll have some time for some Q&A afterwards. The challenge with the Q&A is you do have to be a member. So that we leave to our members. Are really the only ones that we'll allow to interact, ask questions of tonight, Trey and the coaches, whether it's regarding their presentation or if something similar to that brings up a question. This will be the opportunity to do that. Everybody else, if you're not a member, you certainly can listen into that. But to become a member, I did put it in. I'll put it again in the Discord. No, that's not going to do it. In Discord chat, you can go to the website that's listed there that I just posted. If you're over on YouTube, it's easy. You just hit the join button, become a member. It's guys, it's like $3 a month. It's crazy simple, affordable to get this education and get your questions answered, which is a huge part of it. So we'd love for you to become a member. The other part of it too is in regards to asking questions. Again, those of you that are members, make sure you go to the hashtag Ask Questions Here channel. When you have specific questions, we're not going to answer them from the chat itself. Same thing over at YouTube. I created a little, I don't even know what you call it, Trey, some little question answering thing on YouTube. It's called Ask Trey Questions Here. So you click on that as Trey's going through his presentation. If questions come up, pop them in there. Again, if you're a member, I'll ask those when he is done. So again, welcome everybody that's here. I am going to turn it over to the master, the storm chaser, the extreme meteorologist himself, Trey Greenwood. Trey, I'm looking forward to this tonight. What do you got?
Yeah, so let me share my screen here. Make sure that's all good to go. All right. Hopefully everyone can see that. Can everyone
Got
see
it?
me? Can everyone see me drawing on the screen?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So if you follow my channel, you may know that right now I'm working on the breakdown for April 23rd, 2026, which of course was the Bremen and Enid, Oklahoma tornadoes. They're in northern Oklahoma. Enid, of course, the EF4. And so I'm about halfway through that, maybe a little bit more than halfway through that. But as I was going through the meteorological data from this event, and having actually kind of chased that day myself, and I know a lot of folks also chased that day. This It occurred to me that this was a really good example of a day where you have two separate targets along a dry line, and you're trying to select which target is correct. And I know some people went south to southwest Oklahoma. Some people went north and got the goods. And as I've been going through the meteorological data for this event, it has become clear to me that the northern target was the clear target, but you really had to dig into the data and look at the intricacies of the data because it looked initially like the entire dry line might fire, northern Oklahoma all the way down to southwest Oklahoma. But and I was chasing that day. It was actually the arrival day for a tour, so I wasn't looking and doing this kind of analysis ahead of time as we were getting the vans ready and stuff. So we kind of just had to pick a target real quick right after our orientation meeting. And of course, we went southwest and got nothing while all hell broke loose up north. But this is what we're going to do today is just kind of some analysis that you should be doing on a day like this where you have multiple targets and it's not quite clear, not very clear which target to pick. This kind of analysis will help go through it, and especially for a dry line event where the environment might be fairly similar all up and down the dry line, but there may be some nuances that you'll see that. Especially this case was a great example of that could allow you to lean toward one target over another. So we'll start, as I always do, at 500 millibars. We'll just starting out just to kind of set the stage here. We had this big, large trough over the western U.S., ridging over the eastern U.S. So this was going to be a multi-day kind of pattern. This trough was somewhat slow moving, and the pattern became very amplified over the entire U.S. with a lot of these little short waves rotating through. And we had this one in particular here. It was clear that the target was going to be somewhere here, southern Kansas into Oklahoma, somewhere. And it was because of this short wave. This short wave was around the Four Corners region at 12Z. It was forecast to move off to the east, and we'd be in a favorable position with respect to that short wave by the afternoon to allow for upward motion along the dry line and storm initiation there. Now, let's take a look at our position relative to the dry line. So let's imagine you're a storm chaser. You're in Oklahoma City. You're trying to decide between the two targets on these days, whether to go north toward the Kansas border or down to the south, kind of by the Lawton area. Those were really the two targets that day along the dry line. So you're sitting, it's 1, 2, 3 p.m. even. You're in OKC. You're deciding what to do. These are some of the things that you should be looking at. So here with the 500 millibar chart, you'd log on to mesoanalysis and you take a look at where that short wave is and where the jet streak is. So you can see here, if we were to outline this jet streak, this is at let's say 20Z, so that's 3 p.m. here. Here is our jet streak. You see the subtly enhanced flow there aloft. Of course, the SBC page likes to refresh randomly. So here is our jet streak right in there. And of course, if we were to cut this in half and do our four quadrant model, it would look something like this. So our left exit region, as we know, favored quadrant for rising motion, as is our right entrance region. The right exit region and left entrance region are favored quadrants for more sinking motion. And this is a straighter jet streak. You can see this is not a very curved jet streak. With a curved jet streak, we get sort of that two quadrant model where you have rising motion in the entire exit region, sinking motion in the entire entrance region. This is more of a straight jet streak here, so our four quadrant model applies. And right away, this is a clue that you would see might lean you toward that northern target. Our left exit region of the trough is squarely over that northern Oklahoma, southern Kansas corridor, and of course, with the trough moving eastward with time, you would see that left exit region would be nicely over that southern Kansas, northern Oklahoma portion of the risk, whereas the right exit region of the trough is moving over that western and southwest Oklahoma portion of the dry line. So not an end all be all by any means, but it is perhaps somewhat of a discriminating factor here for you to look at. You'd see that that exit region, the left exit region, nicely going to move into northern Oklahoma and southern Kansas. And that's exactly what it did. You can see by 22Z storm initiation right there, we're nicely within that left exit region of the trough up there in northern Oklahoma. So that's one thing you could look at, the progression of the trough. And of course, if you're looking at this a day ahead of time, your models would kind of give you an idea. It might not, of course, it's no replacement for looking at the data the day of to see how it progresses, but you would have an idea that there would be a shortwave moving into the region, traversing across the dry line, and we'd have ascent somewhere along the dry line. And of course, if we were to zoom in here and look at where our trough is, you'd see that that left exit region might be a discriminating factor for us in this case. How about defluence aloft, 300 millibars? These things are not something you just look at in the morning and throw out for the rest of the day. You can keep looking at these things that we talk about in our forecast discussions and such throughout the entire day. So let's take a look at defluence here. So we had a separate little wave up here across the northern plains and then our short wave over the four corners. Our two main waves within this broader, larger trough here. So as we go forward into the afternoon, let's take a look at our defluence. So here we are at 3 p.m. once again. And our defluence is nicely situated over the central plains into the Midwest down into the northern Oklahoma vicinity. So if we look at there, specifically focusing on that northern Oklahoma, southern Kansas vicinity, our wind barbs over northwest Kansas out of the southwest, much more west-southwesterly flow over northern Oklahoma. Down to the south here, across the western and southwest Oklahoma, northwest Texas portion of the dry line, not a ton of defluence aloft in this case. You see the wind barbs not really switching all that much. Maybe a little subtle defluence there, but certainly not as noticeable as farther north. So it would be clear that we might have a much easier time synoptically up here along the Kansas-Oklahoma border to initiate storms versus down to the south where our synoptic forcing is much weaker. Right exit region here down to the south with somewhat more limited defluence compared to areas farther north. So that would be a clue that it might be easier to initiate storms up to the north. Let's go down to the surface now. So let's take a look at our surface observations. And let's go ahead and see. So I'll pull up basically 12Z. Actually, let me pull up the other map here. And this is where stuff like the Oklahoma mesonet comes into play very nicely because you have a much higher resolution look at your surface data here. So I've got 12, 15, 18, and 21 and 22Z here. It's good enough for our purposes. So here we are at 12Z. Our dry line, you can see already starting to initiate or starting to set up back in here. Cold front down to the south, somewhere in this vicinity here, stretching back into the Texas and Oklahoma Panhandle. I don't know if you can hear the rain outside, but we're finally getting some monsoon action here, which is nice. And then the dry line down here to the south. Very dry air back to the west, more moist air to the east. So the dry line somewhere in this vicinity here, just roughly bending back toward the New Mexico border. You would expect that dry line to mix east with time. Very, very dry air, clear skies back to the west. Here we are at 15Z, 18Z, and 21Z. So looking at where our features are, there was a little bit of a weak surface low up in here. You'd probably see that on the mesoanalysis if we were to look at the surface, analyzed surface here. You'd see perhaps a little bit of a weak surface low developing right there in far southern Kansas, right in there. And that we can see very clearly on our surface map. So that is somewhere right in there, right near the Wichita area. Cold front stretching down to the south. You can see the wind shift here. Cooler temperatures back to the west, 70s and 80s, and 90s, and upper 80s down here to the south. So the cold front stretching back in here. And our dry line is likely stretching down from that surface low down through western Oklahoma and bending back here, looking something like that. And this is kind of critical. The orientation of the dry line is very important to look at, especially in a case where it looks similar along the dry line and you are not overly sure about initiation, and especially in a weakly forced environment. And I was actually able to get a mesonet. I actually took a screenshot of the Oklahoma mesonet at 21Z, so that's 4 p.m. Central Daylight Time. So here is our mesonet data, and we can really depict where the dry line is here. So you can see dew points in the 20s, 30s, even some teens back here in western Oklahoma, 60s out here to the east. And it's pretty easy to put where our dry line is. So it's going to bend back like this, then kind of go north south, and then down into southwest Oklahoma like that. Now, notice this portion of the dry line up here in northern Oklahoma compared to down here in southwest Oklahoma, a little bit more slanted up here to the north, particularly across that northern Oklahoma portion. And this may be a little bit off. It might go something like this. We, of course, don't have the Kansas data up here to fill this in, but it would look something like this. Quite a slanted northeast to southwest portion of the dry line up there. We see that somewhat down in here, but it straightens out a little bit down there in southwest Oklahoma. One thing we can look for is the orientation of the low and mid-level winds with respect to the dry line. So if we were to look at our, let's say our 850 millibar winds here, let's go to 21Z. So this is 4 p.m. Our low-level winds out of the southwest here, close to that dry line. So once again, our dry line is somewhere in there. Our low-level winds look something like this, fairly parallel to that portion of the dry line. And I know a lot of folks see a slanted dry line and they immediately kind of throw it out the window as something that's not good. That's not always the case. When you have your low level winds, and it's a fairly weakly forced environment, so you're not expecting quick upscale growth, a lot of storms to develop at once, which was the case on this day on the dry line. When you have your low level winds parallel to the dry line, that's going to keep those updrafts in the zone of ascent along the dry line for longer so they can mature before they move off. In a case where the dry line's a little bit straighter, your low level wind vectors are a little more off the dry line. That can allow those updrafts to move quickly out of the zone of ascent and allow them to kind of struggle to reach maturity before they move out of that zone of ascent and off the dry line. So up here in northern Oklahoma, that was a critical factor here. And models are not going to be able to depict the dry line perfectly ahead of time. You're going to have to look very closely at surface observations throughout the day to see the structure of the dry line. And again, this is where things like the Oklahoma Mesonet come into very much in handy because we have a much higher resolution data set than our typical surface observation. So we can really finely tune where the position of the dry line is and what its structure looks like, where it's slanted, where are the bulges, etc. And we could do that on this day and see that the low level winds were very parallel to the dry line up here, allowing those updrafts that went up on the dry line to initiate and mature, especially with some help from some storm mergers that we got later on. So our evidence is mounting that this northern portion of the dry line was going to be the one that was going to initiate storms. And down here, much less forcing and a slightly less favorable orientation of the dry line with respect to the low level winds compared to farther north. And the defluence aloft favoring farther north as well. That's a pile of evidence showing you that the northern sector was going to initiate compared to areas farther south. Now, what about our thermodynamics, our soundings? So let's go to our soundings here. So you would see this during the day. Let me hide this. So you would see this in the morning, of course, nice morning sounding here, loaded gun type profile, unstable atmosphere, nice elevated mixed layer here, fairly deep elevated mixed layer here at 12Z with a capping inversion beneath it. Nice moist layer there beneath that capping inversion, kind of the optimal depth for plains, especially Oklahoma tornado events. We don't like to see that real deep moist layer out in Oklahoma. You like to see this, I wouldn't call it modest, but it's definitely not super deep like you'd see in, say, the southeast, for example. It's kind of right at that 850 millibar level. That seems to be our optimal depth of the moist layer for these Oklahoma events with a little bit of a capping inversion at the base of an elevated mixed layer. So pretty classic looking sounding, some dry air aloft, strong low level jet, strong low level hodograph, and the upper level winds would increase in the afternoon as we got that shortwave to move in with time. Here we are at 20Z. So we got a 20Z sounding at Norman. That's 3 p.m. Central Daylight Time. Cap hadn't changed much from the morning, so not a ton of forcing over spreading the region. Moist layer hadn't changed in depth all that much. Again, pretty much that optimal moist layer depth there. Plenty of instability. But if we compare this to our Fort Worth sounding, it's pretty similar, but there are some subtle differences here. So at Fort Worth, the moist layer was slightly deeper, but the capping layer, the layer that is capped, is slightly deeper as well. So you see here our capped layer kind of right in this portion right here. That's fairly deep. That goes from about 800 millibars up to almost 700 millibars. So that's a fairly deep layer of capping inversion. Compare that to Norman, not nearly as deep of a capping inversion there. Maybe something like 800 millibars up to about 760, 750 millibars or so. So we have less capping farther north. Of course, Norman's kind of right in the middle, but it's a decent look close to the time of initiation for the northern Oklahoma target. So slightly weaker capping farther north than compared to farther south, closer to that southwest Oklahoma, northwest Texas corridor. And of course, how do you erode the cap? You erode the cap through strong surface heating, which we had up and down the dry line, and you also erode that through forcing. Where did we have the forcing? We had it farther north. So this cap was likely to not be as much of an issue farther north compared to farther south, where we had weaker forcing, a deeper capped layer. That was going to make it a lot more difficult to initiate storms down to the south, southwest Oklahoma, and northwest Texas. And we did get a Lamont sounding as well, not all that different from the 20Z Norman sounding, but even perhaps a slightly weaker and shallower capping inversion there at Lamont, which is northern Oklahoma as well. So these are subtle things, and you would not notice them if you didn't really dig into the data. And this is, again, what you should be doing when you're in a target area or you're kind of split between targets, choosing between targets that are fairly similar. There's usually going to be some subtle differences between the two targets that might allow you to lean toward one versus the other. And here was kind of a clear example, as we saw. The northern target had the forcing, and it had slightly less capping, and that was what should have leaned everyone toward the northern target. Some people, like myself, went south, unfortunately, and that was on our part due to a lack of looking at stuff. So we had other stuff going on, unfortunately, but we should have looked more closely at the data, and we would have seen that north was going to be a play. Storms are going to much more easily initiate up there. Still, you would have to have some favorable stuff as well, such as storm interactions, updraft mergers, and such, because we have a lot of dry air up here. This is the Lamont 18Z sounding. Here is 20Z at Norman. Lots of dry air aloft, so we would need some assistance from updraft merges and storm interactions and whatnot, but we did get that along the dry line where the forcing was stronger. Multiple updrafts were able to initiate. Down to the south, not the case. Another thing to watch, always you want to watch your satellite and through the afternoon. Big issue here with the so here's the satellite starting at 17Z. We go forward, the dry line, you can see the dry line. There's multiple updrafts trying to initiate all up and down the dry line. So it's kind of right in there. You see cumulus down in southwest Oklahoma, in northern Oklahoma, southern Kansas as well. So at this time, it was kind of a coin flip, it looked like, between the targets. You started getting agitation in both areas. But note this cirrus coming in as well. Not always a deal breaker, but when you have, I've very seldom had a successful chase when we've had a lot of cirrus coming into the equation. Light cirrus, light little bands of cirrus can indicate that your forcing is coming in, and those won't be detrimental, but this was a fairly thick deck of cirrus coming in, and I'll actually go to our zoomed out satellite here. You can see it moving in with time. That's just a lot of cirrus coming in, and that was likely going to thwart things. If we didn't have storms already, this cirrus was likely to kind of thwart things down there. We did get an updraft or two to develop down by Lawton, produce some small hail, but the most robust activity was going to easily be up there to the north, which is what we got, where our most favorable factors were overlapping up there along the Kansas border, and that's how we got our tornadic activity to develop across that area. So that maybe it's mostly review for all of you, but it's just a reminder that we really need to be looking at the details closely when we're deciding between a target. You can't just pick willy-nilly, flip a coin. There's going to be some subtle differences between the targets that become apparent with time, and that allows you to make the best decision possible to pick the best target possible in these kind of chases where you have two targets that are fairly similar. So just a reminder to always look at the data, always look at the nuances of the data, and don't just look at your data in the morning and then not look at it the rest of the day. You need to be going through it when you get to your target so you can adjust properly and whatnot, and you'll be a more successful chaser as a result of that. So that's all I got. So I guess we'll do some questions now.
Awesome. Yeah, let's do some questions, folks. If you've got questions for Trey, again, members, we're kind of giving that privilege to members. If you want to become a member, that is in the Discord chat. If you're on Discord watching right now, if you're on YouTube, just hit that join button. And then there is a special location to ask those questions for Trey on Discord. Go to, what's it, hashtag ask questions here. It's in the chat that's been pulled up. So thank you there. And over on YouTube, there is in the chat, there's a special Q&A ask Trey questions here spot that you can ask those. So as you all start putting those in, Trey, I've personally got a couple questions on this. And number one is on dry lines. And when you identify that you're going to target specifically a dry line setup, and you were showing some mesoanalysis. When you see that and you see a dry line, definite dry line, are there other factors or elements then that you should like that? Does that just go, oh, dry line, that's a target. Maybe you identify a triple point there. Or when you see a dry line, are there other factors now that you're going to need more of or less of to still make that dry line productive? Does that make
So
sense?
dry lines are tricky. I've not had a lot of success on dry lines, pure dry lines where you don't have any other help. So I'm always looking for some of those little factors, whether it's an outflow boundary, maybe a little bit of a differential heating boundary that intersects the dry line, or you have, again, like this event, a little bit stronger forcing in one area versus another, or some sort of triple point, some sort of boundary intersection. Those are going to be your best bets for the most productive dry line setups. Pure dry line setups are tough. They tornado wise, they tend to be pretty difficult as far as getting robust tornadic activity. It happens. We've seen it happen plenty of times, but the most productive dry line setups are going to be the ones where you have some sort of assistance along with the dry line, whether that's an outflow boundary or whatnot. That's usually going to be your best bet, like a Dodge City, Kansas day. Nice dry line outflow boundary intersection. Those are going to be your most fruitful, in my experience at least, than just pure dry line days.
Got it. Good. All right. We got some questions over in Discord. M. Frazier says, how exactly does the mesonet work? Why don't other states beside Oklahoma have it?
So that answer is probably money. Um, I don't know why. Every state should have one, in my opinion, because it's so important and we've seen it. Um, the Oklahoma Mesonet is run out of their own entity, but they are housed at the Weather Center in OU. And they just have a bunch of, I forget the exact number of stations, but it's a bunch of different stations that are placed across Oklahoma at a much higher resolution than just your normal stations that are located at airports or whatnot. So it gives you a much higher resolution look, and it's super helpful when you have an Oklahoma setup. West Texas Mesonet is another one. So that's run through Texas Tech. They have a bunch of stations out in West Texas. Kansas Mesonet, there's a Kansas Mesonet, and some other states have Mesonets as well. But the Oklahoma one is definitely the best one. It has the best user interface of all of them. And it's a very, very good tool to have to when you're chasing in Oklahoma to see those real fine scale changes over short spatial distances that you might not be able to see with the other mesoanalysis data.
Do you know, and part of this is just because I don't overly look at that stuff unless I'm in maybe Oklahoma, but are there other private entities? And I'm thinking of websites like WeatherBug. I'm thinking of what's the Tempest weather
Mhm.
stations kind of have a public map of their weather state. Like, are there options like that you've gone to or that are available that can still give you some of that information that's spread out in a big area?
So not necessarily because a lot of those, like a Tempest, those are going to be personal weather stations.
Hmm.
So those are going to be less reliable than
Yeah.
your ones that are at airports or whatnot, or placed out by like the Oklahoma Mesonet. So I don't usually use those. I usually try to look for actual Mesonets like the Oklahoma Mesonet or West Texas Mesonet, because I know they're going to be calibrated well, the data is going to be accurate, and the other ones just you don't have that same confidence in the data.
Makes sense. Livings says, what is the most telltale sign that the dry line will fire in person and while forecasting? So is there something you're looking at while you're there in the field at that point? Or is it pretty much all stuff that you're looking at still on radar, satellite, mesonet, maybe?
So visually, it's going to be, you're looking at the cumulus along the dry line. How are those updrafts doing? Are they going up and kind of dissipating? But it comes from a knowledge of the forcing as well. Like days when you have a nice, well-defined deep trough overspreading a dry line, you're not going to have problems getting storms to go. But on a day like this, where forcing is not the strongest, or you're relying mostly on strong surface heating and dryline circulations to get the job done. Visually, it would just be looking at the cumulus. How do the cumulus look? Do they look kind of wispy and thin and not really all that favorable? Might suggest that they're getting eaten by the cap. Or do they look really robust and cauliflowery and they're going up? Maybe they're struggling to really punch through the cap fully, but they have that robust look. The updraft size is good. Then that's usually a good sign visually. But really, dry lines can be finicky. You can have towers try to go up along the dry line. They'll go up for a little bit and then they'll just die off. Sometimes it just depends. So it takes a well-rounded view of the background environment to know whether the dry line is going to get the job done or not. Um, Also, looking at convective temperature in these kind of days can be good. Convective temperature is the temperature that the surface parcels must heat to in order to become buoyant on their own. So this is more so a parameter that is good for um, really, really weakly forced days. Really, it's for air mass thunderstorms where you don't have any forcing. You're just getting storms by the heat of the sun. And the convective temperature is best in that. And so these weakly forced dry line setups, the convective temperature can be good. I remember what it was it, April 19th, 2023, the Cole, Oklahoma day, the first Cole, Oklahoma day. We weren't sure if the dry line was going to fire or not, but it became apparent as the convective temperature was breached significantly in the afternoon. I think the convective temperature was like 84, and we were at 87 degrees all the way up in central Oklahoma along the dry line. And so it became pretty clear then, for using that storms were probably going to have an easy time initiating, and you could see the cumulus bubbling nicely. So stuff like that would probably be your best bet in real time.
So people are saying in chat, Trey, or asking, and you might have said it and I didn't hear it, but you did tell me before we started what event this was that you were showing. Um, did you mention that?
Yeah,
It,
this case study was April 23rd, 2026. So the Bremen and Enid. The Enid was the
there
EF4
you
from
go.
northern Oklahoma this year.
There you go. All right. Hemelizer Jen just wants a quick refresher on what a dry line is.
So a dry line is just the boundary between the dry, hot air to the west and the warm, moist air to the east. So it's kind of like a front, but it doesn't move all that much usually during the day. It usually mixes east in the afternoon and then retreats back to the west at night. But it's just the boundary of the hot, dry air to the west, usually on the coming emanating from the higher terrain out there, and then the warm, moist air in your warm sector out to the east. And it can act as a boundary that can actually initiate storms in severe weather setups.
She also wanted to know why they're easy to chase.
Usually, they lead to very slower moving storms compared to a big trough coming in that might make storm motion pretty fast. They usually tend to be fairly photogenic. Um, so yeah, dry line. A lot of photographers love dry line days because you get those slow moving photogenic storms. Um, but they can be tough if you're looking for tornadoes again. They can be fairly tough. So it just depends. But if you have favorable conditions like we had on this day, April 23rd, then the dry line's the play.
Sanist wants to know, there's lots of people that have PTSD from planes dry line busts. How do you really gauge convergence on them? I do know they're well loved by the chase community for decades.
Oh yeah, there's definitely not a question that everybody loves a good dry line. Maybe except myself, because I've not had great success on the dry line. But you're just looking at, so there's a couple ways you can do it. Rich Thompson and his tornado forecasting workshop I believe it's like episode 2 or 3, one of those early episodes. He talks about how to see if the dry line circulation is deep enough to support convection. You look at the a sounding on the dry side of the dry line, usually on the higher terrain, and a sounding in just to the east of that on the warm side, warm moist side of the dry line, and you compare those. And if the moist layer on the moist side of the dry line, that sounding extends well up into the mixed layer, it might be easier if I share my screen here again. So I'll share the screen here real quick and show you that. So just a quick example here. In this case, so this would be your moist layer that we're talking about. That the moist layer, how we were talking about how the moist layer depth on this day was fairly optimal. So that goes up to about right there, 800, just above 850 millibars or so. And if we were to take a look at a dry side sounding, it would look very well mixed. So you'd have your very thick inverted V profile all the way up into the atmosphere, and then it would look, something like that. So that's your mixed layer on the dry side of the dry line. If your moist layer on the moist side extends well up into the mixed layer on the dry side sounding, that represents your dry line circulation. The higher that goes up into that circulation, the more likely you are to initiate storms on the dry line. So that's one way to do it. You're not always going to have soundings on both sides of the dry line to compare. So, it's kind of a crapshoot in that regard. As far as looking at surface observations to see that, um, so we can see our dry line here somewhere in this vicinity here, just kind of roughly placing it in like that. So you're just looking how well are those surface obs coming together. So you can see here in this particular point up here, winds are out of the west southwest, whereas here on the moist side we have winds out of the due south. So that's pretty strong convergence there along that portion of the dry line. Another factor we didn't really talk about, nice strong convergence along that portion of the dry line compared to down here we have kind of west south or south southwesterly winds and kind of southerly winds across the dry line there. Not much, not as strong of convergence in this area in southwest Oklahoma compared to up here. So those are going to be your main ways to judge the degree of the dry line circulation and the degree of convergence along the dry line.
M. Fraser's back says, "Hey, I feel like it's easy for forcing to occur along a cold front with cold air wedging itself under the warm, moist air. But what kinds of forcing mechanisms happen along a dry line, assuming there isn't other storm interactions or outflow boundaries?"
So a dry line can initiate storms on its own by strong surface heating. You breach that convective temperature, and of course, you get storms. The convergence along the actual boundary is going to do it, just like a frontal zone, and that dry line circulation we just talked about. So that's a vertical circulation. So you have a descending branch and an ascending branch. In that ascending branch, you can get rising motion along that dry line, and that's how the dry line itself will initiate storms in the absence of a trough or something to do so.
Very good. All right. Ben Hart asks, "Say, I've watched several videos about different types of lift. Seems to be so many ways to get it, and everything from subtle to intense, big to small. I feel like I have a decent understanding of boundaries and the lift they provide, but I don't even know where to start with all these other factors like exit regions, short waves, etc. Any cheat codes or ways to get the hang of it? For example, I can pick out a short wave, but how will I know if it will be enough without relying on cam depictions?"
So that can be tough if you're looking at a very subtle shortwave, like a little kink in the small kink in the flow. That can be tough. Sometimes it's not enough to initiate storms, and it's very difficult to tell if that's going to be the case. Usually, as you get closer to initiation, you can start to see some signs that it might be enough. Sometimes it's just not enough, though. Sometimes you need, and that has to do with the degree of capping in the environment, what boundaries you're initiating on, etc. But that kind of stuff is can be difficult. As far as exit regions go, I'd recommend taking a look at the weather map analysis module in the legacy content, or it's basically just the same as the weather map analysis module on my YouTube channel, and look at the episodes about I believe it's in the 300 millibar episode. If not, it's in the 500 millibar one, but that's at the exit region. So you're just looking at the jet streak, you're outlining the jet streak, and you're making your four quadrants. If it's a straight jet streak, if it's a curved jet streak, the wind contours are curving around the base of the trough. Then really anywhere in the exit region of the trough is going to favor rising motion. If you have a straight jet streak like this one, you outline it. Left exit region favors upward motion. Right entrance region favors upward motion. And the opposite is true for the left entrance region and right exit region. Usually, it's not a big deal. In most cases, some type of upward motion will bleed into the right exit region. So just because a setup is in the left exit region doesn't mean that is in the right exit region doesn't mean that that area is shot completely from getting storms. There could be other factors at play like surface convergence and whatnot that can overcome that as well. But um, yeah, there's a lot of forcing mechanism, and that goes back to the equations and stuff that we just don't have time to get into here. But all you need to do is just looking at the the four quadrants, outlining them. If when you see your jet streak, outline it. Do your four quadrant model. Where's the left exit region? That's going to be your favorite quadrant. But don't look past the right exit region as well. So there are a lot of forcing mechanisms. It can be tricky, especially when you're looking at those very subtle short waves. But it does depend, and it can be tricky to tell if one of those subtle short waves is going to initiate storms or not. And that's where the other factors come in: surface convergence, other features, boundaries at the surface, etc. So they all kind of work in tandem.
So all of you that are interested, I do believe that's Trey's probably working on his next presentation on forcing equations and shortwave equations. That'll be a hot topic. Hot topic, I'm sure. All right, Living Z's back says, and Living Z, this was before my time. This was probably before I was born. But one of a more specific question: what differentiated May 24th, 2011 from most other Dryline events?
So that one you had just really strong dynamics. I would have to look up that day once again to refresh myself of the overall setup, but I believe that was a much more robust trough, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, that was a much more robust shortwave, beautifully negatively tilted shortwave coming in right over the dry line, and I can share the screen real quick here once again to show you that. But here was the 0Z 500 millibar. We'll just go 12Z 0Z. You can see just that's a beautiful progression. Shortwave moving right over the dry
Hmm.
line in Kansas and Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And that was if with that kind of a trough, strong flow traversing the Rockies, we no doubt had a very strong surface low. Um, we'll see here. Let's just go to 925 millibars. Nice surface low there throughout the entire event. At 850, I'm sure we had strong winds aloft. Yeah, 45 knots or so of flow in the exit region, or excuse me, in that low level jet core. So we had very strong shear, very strong kinematics. That textbook kind of trough ejection into the planes, overspreading the dry line. So no issues about forcing. And we had a very strong low level dynamics to get the job done and have multiple tornadic supercells. And we had some storm interactions that day as well that got the job done. It was not the cleanest dry line setup. It was a little bit messier than your typical dry line setup, but that may have helped get you some of those stronger tornadoes through storm interactions and whatnot.
M. Fraser says, I've seen online recently that they have found EF5 damage in Enid. I've also heard that they may update the EF scale. Why do you think they haven't upgraded Enid? And have you heard about an update to the EF scale using new techniques to assess damage?
I'll answer the second question first. Yes, that upgrade has been in the works for quite some time now. They're looking at adding some of those non-traditional damage indicators, like for example, the toppled train cars in Enderlin. That's not a traditional damage indicator, but they're looking at adding some of those in to the updated scale. That's still probably a few years out. They're also possibly looking at adding in radar data from high resolution sources to add into the EF scale as well. They might be in the process of upgrading Enid. These just take time. Enderlin, as we saw, got upgraded in what, August, September, October. So several months after the tornado happened in June. So these things take time. So they may be in the process of officially upgrading it. These were non-traditional damage indicators here. It was tree fall and a tossed RV that they used. They did some math on and found EF5 level winds. So they may be in the process of that. They just need some time to make sure it's official and do some more calculations. So we may see an upgrade in the future. It may be in the works, but it does seem likely that there was EF5 damage somewhere in that Enid path.
And then a continued question, and actually it would be my follow-up question, would be if they upgrade the EF scale, would they go back and change any previous ratings, or would it just start from day one with a new scale?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. It would be nice if they went back and did some of that, like El Reno 2013. It's an EF3. We all know it's not an EF3. It's clearly an EF5. Stuff like that. So I wouldn't be surprised if they went back and did it. I hope they would go back and do it, but um, maybe based on just the sheer number of tornadoes that would need it, they might not and just start a fresh scale. Who knows? It remains to be seen.
Would seem like a big can of worms. Because where do you stop? I mean, it's like, the NCAA basketball tournament. How many teams do you let in? And it doesn't matter how many you add, you're always going to leave some out that you didn't include.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. Did they ever go back when they went from the EF to the EF to the from the F scale to the EF scale? Did they ever go back and make any changes, or was it
No, they did
okay?
not. As far as I know, they have just left it at F versus EF. So maybe it'll be the same protocol here where they won't go back and do it. But it's clear that some tornadoes, like El Reno 2013, do need to be updated if these contextual DIs get added into the scale.
Anybody, if you've got questions for Trey, feel free to jump on over. We've got time to take a few more questions regarding the presentation, or if you've got other questions for Trey. Bama Chasers back says, quick question. I'm sorry, not how. Low level stratus clouds are a common big issue on severe weather days here in the Southeast. What is the thermodynamic synoptic reason for this?
Moisture. You just have so much moisture down there usually that you just have it condenses and it's cool enough above the surface for those to condense into clouds. They'll eventually break off. They usually do break down and dissipate as you go into the afternoon, but not always. It depends, but it's just you have so much moisture down there. It's a problem in the plains too, but vertical mixing here in the plains does a better job of eroding that because you get some of that drier air from aloft. Once it's sunny above the stratus, you get some mixing down from aloft of that drier air, and you can allow those stratus to dissipate nicely in the afternoon. Not as easy to do that in the southeast because you have just such a moist profile all the way up usually. Why the elevated mixed layer is usually a really good sign in the southeast if you're looking for a big tornado event. You can get some of that dry air to erode the stratus, but it's just from the moisture and it condensing.
So, talking about clouds, you mentioned in your presentation, Trey, how kind of coming from on that particular day, coming from the southwest, there were some high level cirrus clouds and thicker level cirrus clouds coming into play. What, and you mentioned typically that doesn't bode well for storm initiation, but what is it? What causes that? Is it the cooling that causes that, or is there something else?
So it's some type of moisture aloft, and it just condenses up there and freezes, and ice crystals are up there, and you get that. Oftentimes ahead of troughs, you can get it. It can be some orographic processes as well. Sometimes you'll see some of that cirrus start to develop as the trough, that southwesterly flow goes over the higher terrain of New Mexico or whatnot. You get kind of this trail of cirrus clouds as the trough traverses that. So that's where they kind of stem from. Like I said, it can be a good sign if you have just some of these light bands of cirrus. That can be a good thing. When you have a thick deck of cirrus moving in, usually not a good sign because that can reduce instability. If it's anvil overspread, there's subsidence under that anvil overspread, and of course you're blocking the sun as well. So not a good thing usually when you have cirrus. It can work out sometimes, but usually you don't want to see that cirrus in place.
Still open for a few more questions. I do want to thank, so over at YouTube, we got some people watching in on YouTube, but I want to thank Alex Redmond Jr., who just became a Chaser Academy member tonight. So thanks, Alex, for joining us over there. Um, a lot of people in the chat over at Discord, and Sanis is back. Says semi-related question. Hey, they don't have to be related. They can be semi-related. They can be very distant related. It's all okay. But wants to know, can you maybe give some insight on separating the good from the slop when cloud cover is there? Has some examples here. July 29th, 21 had some big cloud cover in Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, and put down a lot of tornadoes. But on July 21st, 26, everything puttered out. Would that require favorable storm interactions or something you can actually get from the ENV? What's ENV?
Probably EML, I think he might,
Okay.
I would think. But
Okay.
it's a case by case basis. A lot of times in the southeast, you'll see that those low level clouds don't really go away, but you just have so much moistening and warm advection underneath that that you can still get the temperatures to warm a little bit underneath that cloud deck to allow for instability to be realized and storms to go up. But oftentimes it's not the case. Oftentimes you do need that surface heating. But it just depends. If you have really strong forcing, a lot of times it doesn't matter as much because as we know, kinematics can make up for strong kinematics can make up for weaker thermodynamics. So if you have very strong forcing and strong low level wind fields, sometimes it just doesn't matter. You can get maybe a line of storms that produces a lot of tornadoes because the kinematics are strong. But that yeah, usually works out in the eastern U.S. more so, southeast, sometimes the northeast. In the plains, a lot of times that just doesn't work. You need the sunshine and you have more of the EML in place as well to help things out there. It's why the EML is so important because it can help erode um, the cloud layers because it has that dry air can mix down from below. So it's a case by case basis. It just depends. But usually it's when you have really strong kinematics, and that usually is a plus in those cases when you have cloud cover and just really strong warm advection.
All right, here's what we're gonna do. I've got one more question. This is over on YouTube, and this is from Whether or Not 1000. Whether or not I know you're not a member, so hit that join button, become a member. But I'm going to ask your question anyway. Let that be the last question here. It says it's a little bit random, but I was wondering about MCVs. What effects do they have on the environment? What processes from them cause storm initiation, and how do they form?
So basically, it's just a surface low. You can think about it as a low pressure area. So it spins counterclockwise. So ahead of it, you're going to have rising motion, usually east and northeast of it. And that's going to be where your wind fields are maximized as well. Low level flows more back. It can be slightly stronger ahead of that. So that is usually a favorable sign for renewed storm activity, especially if you have clearing out ahead of it. You do need to have adequate instability, of course, but it acts as just another forcing mechanism like a trough or a low pressure area. So they can be very favorable, as we saw on June 21st this year in the Midwest. 82 tornado reports from an MCV. Um, it acts kind of like a hurricane as well. Your northeast quadrants, where the strongest low level winds and tornadic activity is going to be. That's the same for MCVs. MCVs form from the remnants of MCSs. It's the latent heat transfer and whatnot. The science is not really all that important, but they come from MCSs, and then they just act as areas of spin. And out ahead of that, if you have adequate destabilization, it can act like a trough or a low pressure area that can initiate storms. You have rising motion out ahead of it, and stronger wind fields usually out ahead of it, which is why you can get some tornadic activity out ahead of them.
Very good. All right. So, folks, one thing I do want to share with everybody, a little shameless plug for me. Stormfront Freaks, our podcast, is coming back. It's going to be a reunion of the Freaks. If you haven't heard, there is a documentary coming out. It premieres on the 21st of this month. So, check out your AMC listing, AMC Theater listing. See if you got one near you. But Never Stop Chasing. So, it's a documentary that's out with Reed Timmer. If you've been on social media, you've probably seen a lot of posts, but we're going to have a lot of fun. Our podcast, The Stormfront Freaks, we're having a reunion show next Tuesday night, the 18th, at 8 o'clock. You can find us on YouTube, Stormfront Freaks Network. That's where we'll be, but we're going to have Reed Timmer with us and the director of the film, Ken Cole. So we're going to have a great time, a lot of fun talking about the movie, getting you guys all set up to head out and watch that. So that should be a banger of a time. So, what about you, Trey? Great job tonight. I'll be honest. For me, one of the best ways to learn is to see something like that, like to show an actual example. When Cameron was on the other night, we actually were pulling up live weather front radar of storms that were happening, and he was, that stuff is amazing. And I think, at least for me, I learn a lot from that. So thanks for putting the time to put that together.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It makes me mad how they teach meteorology in college because it's all equations. And that's not important
Yeah.
on a day-to-day basis, especially if you're storm chasing and want to forecast severe weather. Yeah, it's cool to know what the terms of the vorticity equation mean and what they represent. But at the end of the day, you need to know that the left exit region is your favorite quadrant for rising motion, right exit regions not so much. You just need to know what a dry line is, and stuff like that, and how to read surface observations and how they're changing. So yeah, these actually applying the meteorology is definitely the best way to learn. So I always love doing these kind of case studies and actually digging into data from real life events. That's how you learn storm chasing and severe weather forecasting and actually targeting for chasing the most.
And definitely for those that don't know, head over to YouTube, search Convective Chronicles, which is Trey's channel. He's got a lot of that stuff, which is why that's so popular and why he's such a great coach. Is he's got a lot of real life examples that he shares. Anything else you want to cover or talk about that you're coming up with here shortly or soon?
Nope, not really. The Enid video's coming out hopefully this weekend or early next week, and then we'll move on to some of the other events this year. A couple of ones in May, and then we'll do the June trifecta out in the Midwest. Those 3 big days in the Midwest for tornadoes and some other stuff hopefully sprinkled in there that I have planned. So
How's the monsoon season still looking?
it's good. It's been active. We haven't had a ton of stuff here in the valley necessarily, but last few days have been pretty active, and we just got blasted here as we were talking. When I mentioned that if you could hear the rain outside, we actually got a nice microburst right over the house here. So
Did you really? Okay, I
yeah,
didn't hear it, but I certainly heard you mention it. So it's
yeah,
always fun.
yeah.
And you kept your power, so that's always a good thing.
Yes, yes.
Very good thing. So, well, very good. Well, hey, I appreciate the chat. It was great having you all here. You did have some amazing questions tonight. Those are really good. And you were obviously listening to the presentation. So it just shows that Trey's a great coach, as well as those of you over on YouTube. I know it's kind of a new platform for us, but thanks for joining us. Love to see you, more of you become members, so we can get more questions from those of you over on YouTube as well. So with that, Trey, you got any closing thoughts?
Nope. Just thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you guys soon.
Sounds great. Oh, I will. Let's take a look who's next. We've got coming up tomorrow, 8 o'clock. Gabe is going to be hosting Hunter, talking about upslope regimes. So I got another coaching session tomorrow night. So back-to-back coaching. Good week. Good week. So we'll see y'all tomorrow night. Thanks for tuning in.